was below the belt, hitting below the belt.
I mean, it was below the belt, but it seems like there was a lot of controversy there, and that there was intelligence that was ignored.
Yes,
Voldemort had beaten
afterwards.
up.
Yes, she was. She resigned after that,
There was a little bit of
and
a
I
level
think
of
there was
suspicion.
a lot of guys had to resign in the army as well.
And I've read up on the Egyptian perspective of the Yom Kippur War, and they were so humiliated in the 6 Day War. Good morning, Duffy. They were so humiliated in the 6 Day War that they really did a good job of preparation for the Yom Kippur War. They didn't want to be humiliated. They really practiced well, but at the end of the day, they didn't make it anyway.
No, they lost anyway.
And today's also the
Yeah,
year.
a lot of Carbonis fell on that war. I think they lost close to 3,000 soldiers.
So there was probably not a family in Israel that was not impacted by it.
That's right.
I remember they had a drive to recruit people from all over the world to come help Israel. Israel's in dire straits then, and my father was a strong guy, so he always tells us a story how humiliated he was. So he went to an Israeli enlistment office in Toronto because they were trying to attract people from all over. And they looked at him and says, "What's an old fat man like you going to do for us? You're just going to cause us problems. Stay in Toronto. If you want to help, send money." And he was so insulted. In 73, my father was in his 40s. Right, so he was very, very insulted that he thought he was so strong. Meantime, I told him, what are we going to do with a guy like you? You're just going to hold us back. What? No, it's okay. There's no milk. I tried. I tried.
There's a lot of frum boys died on that day.
Sure.
Because a lot of people went to join, units and daven for them in the at the front before they knew that war was going to break out.
They just went to daven. They weren't soldiers.
Or they were soldiers, and they for some reason there was a lot of frum people on the front. The Chilonim went home for Yom Kippur, but
the truth of the matter is the Chilonim are just as Jewish as we are. Every loss of the Chilonim is just as tragic as a loss of the
Yeah.
And today's also the Yosy of Mar Bar Ravashi. So Ravashi, he was the son of Ravashi. Ravashi was one of the people who finalized the Gemara. Ravashi towered over everybody in Godless. And he had a life's project to finalize the Gemara at Kedei Kach, that when Ravashi was supposed to die, I guess in those days, when you're that big, the Malach HaMelech has to make an appointment. So the Malach HaMelech came to Ravashi and said, "Okay, time for you to die." So Ravashi said, "I need another 30 days. I just finished the Gemara. I want to review it one more time just to make sure it's clear. Give me 30 days. I need to review Shas just to make sure that it's perfect." So the Malach HaMelech said, "Okay, I'll give you another 30 days. So we'll be back in 30 days." He came back in 30 days and says, "Oh, you're just on time for your appointment. Let's go." Imagine if the Malach HaMelech had to schedule with you at your convenient time.
Well, if they're like the doctors in Ontario, a specialist, you got a couple of years.
Shmuel says, "What Shmuel?" Right. So Shmuel heard somebody who's supposed to lose his eyesight. You want to Rebbe? And the Rebbe said, "Learn a Masechta. Oh, know it so well, so you'll be able to learn." The Rebbe said, "If you learn a Masechta, then you'll know it, and I'll give you a bracha. This when you lose your license, if you lose your eyesight, you'll be able to have that Masechta." So he said, "Choose a Masechta." So the guy picked Yevomis. He says, "I'm just going to guarantee you." The Rebbe said, "I promise you that you'll be able to see until you finish that Masechta." So he made sure to learn a Be'in. The Ayin and Be'in. Okay. Zak the Heilige Gemara. We're at the bottom of Nun Amud Beis, the last two lines, just at the Divrei Mas. And the Mishnah says, "Amar Shvisasi V'ikroi." If someone said, "I'm 2,000 amas away from this tree, and I want to be cutting a shvisa at the tree, but I'm being very specific right at the trunk of the tree, that's where I want to be kohen shvisa. Zoktamor mahalach mimokim raglo var ikrei al mama. Then he is able to go because he was kohen shvisa, and then meikor lebesei al mama, and then you could go beyond the tree another 2,000 amas and get home for the kreploch. Nimtze mahalach mishachashecha dalet al mama. So it comes out even after it's dark on Shabbos, he's traveling 4,000 amas, which is typical of a case when you have an Erev Tchumen. Amarava, this halacha that you could make an Erev from a distance, even though you're not there, is only behu dechirahit leikrai mati. If he made the Erev early enough on Friday afternoon, that if he would run to get to the place where he wanted to establish his Erev, if he would get there before Shabbos, if he ran. He doesn't actually have to, but he has to be able to. Amar le Abaye, how could you say that? It says that he made the Erev when he noticed that it's getting dark. So he's already out of time even before he starts. Zakta Gemara, what it means is, it means that if he wanted to go to his house, at this point, it would be dark by the time he got to his house. Also, he can still make it to the Ikra Shel Ilan. When it's dark, that's Kimaski Kali Kali. If he walks very slowly, for that it'll be too dark for him to get to the tree. I will roy it, but if he runs, Mati, he would arrive. No, to the contrary, you could be kohen shvisa at any place that's so far away that you wouldn't be able to get there unless you ran. But you don't have to run. You don't have to get there. You don't actually have to get there. If I would continue to my house, by the time I got to my house, it would be dark. That's exactly what you are doing, except you don't have to rush. Right? All you're accomplishing is that you don't have to rush. Well, you're right, exactly. So you're saying, why bother making Erev? Wherever I am when it gets dark, I'll just say I'm kind of to claim me. Right? But that means you have to actually get there. In this case, you don't even have to get there. You can actually walk slow. Correct. That's what it's saying. Now, there's a whole big shiloh. This opens up a whole avenue of shiloh. First of all, what's chashecha? Shkia or tzeis? So the Mishnah Berurah says that since it's all the abundance here, we give you till much later. I'm not sure if we give you till Satmar or Shkia, but we definitely give you a lot more than just the Shkia. The other shiloh says it depends on you yourself how fast you can run, or does it depend on how fast the average person can run? Because that also will make a huge difference in how much time you have. So these are the shots in the Achronim which Rosh speaks about. Zok Gemara, Rabbi Yosef have a kaza borcha. This is gewaltig. This teaches you how to debate and how to convince somebody of something, sometimes by bending the rules. In a debate, sometimes you mamish want to win. Tonight we're going to have the opportunity to see slight bending of the rules in order for someone to win a debate. Tonight's the debate between Trump and Biden. So there'll be a slight modification of the rules just to try to get an edge. We'll see some subtle variances from the truth in order to get an edge. So Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef were walking on the way. Amalei Rabbi Yosef, hey shvisa seinu tusi dikla desavalach. Rabbi knew his way, and Rabbi said, let's be kohen shvisa by those trees. There's a tree there that one tree is leaning on another tree. Let's make that place be kohen shvisa. Let's be kohen shvisa there. So Rabbi knew exactly that there was a certain tree there, that another tree was leaning on it, and he pinpointed the location. Like we learned, if you know a guy, if your travel companion knows his way around, even though you don't, you can rely on him. Ramila, and some people say it was Tusi Dikla de Parak More. This was a tree that produced $750 worth of fruit every year. And therefore, the Parak Mori Mekargam, it was the tree that provided all of the money necessary to pay your yearly income taxes. And what's the yearly income taxes of a billionaire is about $750. If you read the New York Times this weekend, you know what I'm talking about? So the tree was able to produce $750 worth of fruit. It paid up all its taxes for the year. So Shmuel said not only does Trump, if you go to view the same thing. So Amrle, lo yadanale. What do you mean? That's not an avah. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Avada. That's Trump said. I'm a good businessman. I'm exploiting the tax law that Biden made. Amrle, lo yadanale. I don't know. Rabbi Yosy told Rabbi, I don't know about that tree. Amrle, smachalai. Don't worry, I got your back. Just rely on me. The Tanya, Rabbi Yosy Yomer. We learned from Rabbi Yosy. Now, if you look up our Mishnah or the Brisa that we learned, it doesn't quote Rabbi Yosy. But Rabbah, in order to convince Rabbi Yosef that he could rely on him, he says, Rabbi Yosy Yomer, if there's two people, Echad Makir, Echad She'ein Makir, one knows his roads and one doesn't. Zeh She'ein Makir, Moiser Shvisasei L'Makir, he can give over. He says, wherever you pick, whichever location you pick, I'm good with. Zeh She'makir Omer, and the person who remembers says, Hey Shvisaseinu, Tamak employment. But Veloyi, Loi Tanalei, Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yosy never said it. This was a Stam Mishnah. Rabbi Yosy never said it. Rabbi wanted to convince Rabbi Yosef that he knows his stuff. So Mishum Rabbi Yosy said over Rabbi Yosef's name because anything Rabbi Yosy said was always accepted. Because Rashi over here says because his words were straight, understandable. In the other receptors, Rashi says the Muki Imoy always has a raya. He proves himself. So he used Rabbi Yosy to convince people. So this brings up some ethical issues. So there's a whole big shaila. Someone asked, I forgot who asked, I wrote it down. Someone asks a shaila. It says that if you say something over in the wrong person's name, it's mistalik the shechina. So how can you do this? So there's a whole bunch of different terutzim that are offered. The Magen of Rome paskins that because of this, if you need to convince somebody of something of halacha, if you want to convince somebody of halacha and you're not sure if they'll accept it from you, you're allowed to do this. He passes on this. So I forgot who asks on him. How you talking? So they answer, when is a Misal Kishkiner? If Yankel said something and you say it over in Beryl's name, that's an avah. And here you're not taking the credit away from anybody, you're just giving it to Rabbi Yosy. That's one shot. Another guys, in order to be able to do a mitzvah, if it's an important thing and you want to be able to do a mitzvah, you're allowed to use alternative means of persuasion. What? I hear my rabbi used to always say, Yosy, I don't care if you say over all my Torah in your name, but never say your Torah in my name, right? So that's you say, who did your best wanted the credit? But vice versa, was emes, so he was able to, in order to convince, he was able to use other people's names. I don't know. So Zok the Gemara Vayter. This the Gemara we're about to learn is one of my favorite Gemaras because I call it a barrel zamt Gemara. I always say over the story about barrel zamt. There's a guy's name was Beryl Zam. So his friend asked, what a funny name, Beryl Zam. Where did your name come from? So Beryl said, it's very simple. Beryl for carrot spells labor. Labor in Hebrew is kuved. Kuved in Yiddish is shver. Shver in Hebrew is a shvua. A shver, a shvua. Shvua is a vach. A vach is choil. Choil is zamt. Beryl Zam. It fits it perfectly. I don't know what you don't get. Choil is sand. The Yiddish word for sand is zamt. So chayil zamt. So it's so simple. Beryl zamt. It's obvious, right? So we're gonna have now a beryl zamt. Zok the Gemara. The Gemara says that you have 2,000 amos. When you set up a nerve, you have a 2,000 amma radius. Correct the Gemara. Hani alpayim amma heichad ksivim. Where does it say in the Torah 2,000 amos? Where did you get it from? Where did you get that when you koine shvisa you have a radius of 2,000 amos? Dr. Gemara, the Tanya, Shavu Ish Takta. In the Parsha of the month, we say Shavu Ish Takta, but see Rashi, Ruki Hashem Nasan Lechem Shabbos, which are not Rashi Torah. Alkein Hu Nasan Lechem B'yom Hashisi Lechem Yimayim, Shavu Ish Takta. Stay where you are. And we learn from there, Elu Arba Amos. That's referring to the 4 amos that a person has, and we learned that a couple of days ago. And then the puzzle continues, Al Yetze Ishmim Koimoy. What does that mean? Elu Alpayim Amos. Because Mekoimoy is 2,000 amos. Minolon, how do you know that Mekayim is 2,000 amos? So it's obvious. It's obvious. Amr Rav Chisda is very simple. Lamadnu Mokai mi Mokai. Here it says Al Yechish Mkoimai. So there's another pasuk that uses the word Mkoimai. But that place that uses the word Mkoimai doesn't say anything about 2,000 amas. But that place that happens to use Mkoimai also has the word Nisa in there. Umokaim mi Nisa. So as we go through this, I'm going to run through Rashi and quote these psukim. So where does it say, where's there a pasuk that says Mokam and Nisa? It says V'samti l'cha Mokam asher yanu shama, referring to the Ari Mikla. But by that pasuk which is Mokam and Nisa, it doesn't say anything about 2,000 amas either. But there's another pasuk that says Nisa, the Nisa min Nisa, and that other pasuk that says Nisa, it also mentions the word Gvul, the Nisa migvul. And where does it say Nisa migvul? It says the following pasuk. It says migvul mirklatai asher yonus. So he uses the word running away, yonus, and he uses the word migvul. And then, but again, it doesn't say anything about 2,000 amas there either. But there's another pasuk that uses the word gvul, ugvul migvul, and that other place that uses the word gvul, it uses the word michutz there, ugvul michutz, and that pasuk is, it says shenemar umatza oisei goyel hadam michutz legvul. If the goyel hadam finds the word tzach michutz legvul, so now we're connected to now mikoymai just got connected to chutz, the chutz michutz, and that pasuk where it says chutz doesn't say anything about 2,000 amas either. But there's another pasuk that says chutz that says 2,000 amas. And it says, "Umadaishem michutz la'ir es ba'as kedma alpayim ba'amah." So it's so obvious that when it says b'mkoima, it obviously means 2,000 amas because of Beil Zam. Zok the Gemara. Okay, I follow your reasoning. I got it perfect. But the problem is the final chutz. You decided to go to a pasuk that talks about 2,000 amas. V'neilaf mikira ir b'chutza elef amah. But there's another pasuk that says chutz and it only uses 1,000 amas. So how do you know to rely as your final stage in our trip around the world looking for a makar of 2,000 amas? Who said to go to the chutz that's referring to 2,000 amas? Maybe go to the chutz that's only talking about 1,000 amas. Oh, that's the Gemara's answer. You're gewaltig. Gewaltig. You know, we're not just wishy-washy. We're very precise over here. We can't just go anywhere. We could only go to a place where it says it's klar, chutz. That's right. Zok Gemara. Umay nafkamina. What's the difference between chutz and chutza? We always learned that you're allowed to be a little liberal when it comes to connecting the dots on a Gzera Shava. Because Atana the very Bishmol, the Shava Koyin, Uva Koyin, Zuhi Shiva, Zuhi Bia. Let me just run quickly through the rules of Nege Batim. The halach is if someone finds a nega in his home, first he takes everything out of the house because you don't want it to become tummy. And then you ask the kohen check it out. So the kohen goes in and he looks at it. And if he sees that it's a nega, what he has to do is he says, we're going to lock this house up for 7 days and we're going to see what happens. They come back in 7 days. And that's where it says Uvah HaKoyin. It says Uvah HaKoyin, the kohen comes back in 7 days. That's as Shlomo saying Gavaltic. The first instance of 13 is found at this Corona hotel. There was a nega b'kirais habayis. So the pasuk says the kohen, after the kohen locks up, it comes back a week later, and if the nega is there, and if it spreads, if it got bigger, so what he has to do is they take out the blocks that have the nega in it, and they scrape out the cement around it. They put in brand new blocks. They fix the problem, and they lock it up for another week. The kohen comes back in another week. If he finds a nega there, they have to chop the house down. If he doesn't find a nega there, then it's clean. That's what the pasuk says. And it says when he comes back the second time, he uses the word v'shova kohen. So the first time he came back after 7 days, he used the word v'va kohen. The second time he comes back, he used the word v'shova kohen. They're referring to the same thing. The kohen comes back to the house. The question is, the pasuk only explicitly discusses a case where the kohen came back twice. The first time it didn't spread, and the second time it came back, right? Well, what happens if when he comes back, if when he comes back the first time, it didn't spread? So the halacha is again, he sees it the first time, he comes back a week later. If it spreads, then he's gotta take the blocks out. The Torah doesn't discuss explicitly if he comes back after the first week and it didn't spread. What does he do then? So we learn a series of halachas that if you came back after the first week and it didn't spread, you lock it up again, and you come back a third week, and at that point, if it spread at that point, the halacha is from the pasuk itself. If you read it, it would almost sound as if you just chopped the house down, but no. If you come back the second week, you also have to go through the same process and take the blocks out before you can knock the house. So that's the limit that we're learning from Uvdal Kohen v'Shavah Kohen. The same way in the original form that the Torah presents the question. Because he came the first time and he sees that there's a nega there. He comes back a week later and sees that it's spread, and then he clears it all out and he puts in new bricks, and then he comes back a second time, and if the nega comes back, he knocks it down. We learn from there is that you never knock down the house unless you had a chance to pull the blocks out first. So therefore, if he came once and then he came back the second time and it didn't spread, you lock the house up again for another week. And if it spread the second week, then you don't just knock it down like it would be mashma from the psukim, but we learn just like the first time when he came back, he has to take the blocks out and do a transplant with clean bricks and then see if it comes back. So too, if this happens after the second week, you do the same thing. So we made Gzeir Shava from the word Uboah Kohen to the words V'Shava Kohen. So you see, when it comes to Gzeir Shava, you don't have to be so precise. So why don't we learn chutz from chutza, and then it should only be 1,000? So up to Gemara, when do you take? When are you liberal with your comparison of terms? If you cannot find an exact term, if you have chutz and you have chutza, of course, it makes sense to go to chutz. Then you learn it from what makes the most sense. I remember once after Shir, I went to offer a teretz on a kasha that Revel Yishvei, that's all asked in Shir. So I told him what I thought was the greatest teretz, right? And Revel tells me, was darf ich quetschen? Really, ich muss sagen nach Shir. Ich muss sagen, einmal sage ich gut, einmal sage ich nicht gut, aber ich darf sagen, ich darf nicht sagen, dass der Kranke kommt.
Yosy, about this Gzeir Shava.
Yes.
Okay, it seems like is there a precedent for a 5-player Shava?
I'm not sure.
There rules?
I knew you would love it. I knew. David also wants to know, is there a precedent for a 5-stage Gzeir Shava? I don't know.
It sounds ridiculous.
That's why Gzeir Shava must have been passed down from Rebbe to Talmud. Because who would connect those dots?
Right. So this must be.
The guy's name.
It's got to be Messiah from Har Sinai or something.
Yeah, it must be. Who's the famous guy Goldberg who made that Honda commercial?
Just give David the same answer the Revelia gave you. Give him the same answer. Moshe Rabbeinu, ich darf quetschen, so I need a Shabbat 7 Parker.
He makes these sequences. Dave said, "Where do you have to president?" So Akiva said that Yosy said, tell you what Revelia told him. So who is the guy? Rubik Goldberg. The guy Goldberg he made a famous Honda commercial. He makes this thing hit that thing and this thing hit that thing. He creates long sequences. He creates long sequences of different things happening to come out all the way at the end. The guy Goldberg, he makes these things. He made a famous Honda commercial where he takes different Honda parts and this hits the ball that way, and the ball goes here, and this knocks this brings into this, and eventually it just makes the Honda ignition switch turn and a new Honda. So this is such a type of situation. I'll have to find it for you on YouTube. This Honda commercial. Alpaim Amma Agulas. Now we're discussing: is it a radius of 2,000 amas, or is it a 2,000 amas square, or a 4,000 amas square? The Reb Chanina ben Antignus asked the following question. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a machlokes in the Mishnah if it's square or if it's round. Right? That was the machlokes in the Mishnah. So the problem is Rabbi Chanina ben Antignus learns it out of. He held it was round. So let's look inside the Mishnah so we get a little bit of clarity. So look at the Mishnah. It says as follows: Zachaloi mekoymoi alpaim amal ruach agulois. It's a radius. Diver Rabbi Chanina ben Antignus. Mirabois kitabla mirabas, like a chessboard. So you have 2,000 amas, or you have 4,000 amas by 4,000 amas. Kadeshi Niskalo is obvious. So you get the corners that stick out further. So, but the corners, you're not getting 4,000 amas. You're getting about 5 1/5 or something, because it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if you have a 4 by
It's
4,
1.4,
it's 4.4, because basically it's
1.4 more space.
square root of 32, right? Because a squared is 16. Right? If it's a triangle, it's 4 by 4. So it's a squared is 16, b squared is 16. So 16 plus 16 is 32. The hypotenuse is going to be the square root of 32. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. So it's closer to 6 than it is to 5. Right? So based on that, the Gemara wants to know, and he knows it from a pasuk. How does he know it? He knows it because the pasuk says, where is it? So let's see what it says. Now, where do you know this from a Pai Mama? So it's like Zereshava. If you hold it to Zereshava, because if you look at the pasuk that we learned 2,000 amas from, it says as sides. So the sides of the city that we're measuring are not rounded
corners.
It's actually flat. It's a border. So if he holds of the Zereshava, either Zereshava pays Ksiba, it says pays there. And he less like Zereshava, and if he doesn't hold to this Zereshava that teaches you 2,000 amas, I'll pay my Eminoli. How does he even know B'klal? Eating 1,000 amas. What? I'm not sure what it's talking about. I think he's talking about the cities of the Levium. I think he's talking about the cities of the Levium, which is some, the cities with some connected argument as well. That's right. The cities of the Levium were argument. Exactly. So the same person that teaches 2,000 amas, it's talking about squared. Right? Mechi's our lady. That's right. Mechi has to know this. Mechi, you got to know exactly where his property rights are. Akiva, you got to know your property rights. You don't get a radius from your Levi cities. You get a full square.
Yeah.
That's called cornering the market. Zog to Gemara. Loilam is like Zereshava. Loilam is like Zereshava. The shiny hacha, the reason why it's only rounded over here, the Amar Kra Zeh Yelachem Migrashei Arim. This is only for Migrashei Arim. Lazeh at the nice and payos. Only for the Migrashei Arim do they get the corners. The Ata nice and payos l'shoiv say Shabbos. When it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, there it's a radius. The Rabbanon learned from this pasuk that it's a square even for Shabbos. Tani Rav Chananya Omer Kazeh Yiu Kol Shoiv Shabbos. It doesn't mean Zeh only for Migrashei Arim. To the contrary, this is how it'll be for Shoiv Shabbos as well. Which means now it opens up a whole new halacha that we never knew. We know that if you carry something 4 amas or Rishus Rabim, there's a chiyuv deraisa. That 4 amas is not 4 amas; it's the hypotenuse of 4 amas. So if you want to carry, if someone carries only 4 amas, he's actually not over. The definition of carrying 4 amas now is no longer 4 amas. It means the hypotenuse of a right triangle that's 4 by 4, which would mean it's more than 5.5 amas, is what you have to carry to be able to be over. Now Rashi learns that this is only the guy carrying. Tosfos brings down the shita. It's fascinating where this lachsoina comes from. Tosfos says it will be for everything. Anytime you're measuring 4 amas on Shabbos, whether it's for tchum, whether it's for carrying, how far you're allowed to carry, it's never 4 amas. 4 amas means 5 2/3. That's what 4 amas means. Yes, I want to address that. No. What he's saying is unbelievable. He brings down, Tosfos brings down a pshat and I'll explain you how it works with Rashi. Tosfos brings down a pshat from our Rabbi Shmuel, and he says, it all depends on where you're measuring. If you're measuring a direct north-south axis, or a direct east-west axis, then it's 4. But if the direction you're measuring is in a diagonal, so if you're traveling due north or due south or due east and due west, then it's only 4 amas. But if you're traveling in a diagonal direction like northeast, then you have to, in order to be over, you have to carry 5 2/3. So it actually depends on what direction you're carrying it. And that's what Rashi refers to as well. Rashi says that the Gabi Tchumen, it depends on how you're setting up your square, and Lagabe carrying, Lagabe carrying, it depends on what direction you are. By Tchumen, it's taka only 4,000 amas by 4,000 amas, but Lagabe carrying, it depends on the direction that you're carrying it. If you're carrying in a due east, due west, due north, and due south, then it's only 4 amas. But if you're carrying more than that, if you're carrying on a diagonal, then it's actually longer, which is a huge chiddush that I never ever knew. But that's what it's telling us. Right. So if you're walking due north and due west, you have the small squares. But if you're walking on a diagonal, you're actually going to be walking. You're actually going to have to put more space. This is talking about an area that you're going to have as part of your tchum. So if you're on a diagonal, then your tchum ends up being bigger. Yeah, that's the inner square, the inner 4 squares. Though that plus. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. It shows the opposite. It shows Mizrach is the long way. It shows. I'm sorry. You're right. On the picture, it shows that the due east and due west and due north and due south is actually the longer way. Yeah, but the picture doesn't seem to show that. That's right. The picture does not seem to show that. Let me see what Rashi says over here. Hein belachsonos of Rashi dover acher. V'ches chum she'amad amron kazeh yu kol shoyf she'shabbos peyos tein lahen v'gabi avora lekel v'meis peyos elo ki hagavno she'noisen lon shir alachsonon the lekel l'meimer behu revu v'igol. It doesn't make, since it's just a line when you're carrying something 4 amas, it's just a line. So therefore, it's going to be the extra shear of the diagonal. So I'm not sure let's see what the back is going on. The back is going on the base. Or is there a base in Rashi or is that on the Gemara? That's the Gemara, I think. Rashi learns that when you're walking straight, you have more than 4 amas. Yeah. So Rashi. Oh, he's referring to Tosfos. But Rashi for sure learns that when you're carrying, it's a little bit more, and Shmuel in Tosfos learns it's for everything. So we can quickly run through Tosfos. So let's see this is Shmuel Mafarish. Shemar. Oh, thank you so much, Lynn. I appreciate it. Shemar Bian, who brought the milk? Oh, Moshe Blasdin? Moshe Blasdin. Okay. Shemar Bian Dalet Amos Rishus Harabim Biribua Olam. You look at the square based on the direction of the world. If you're throwing something either due east or due west, due east, due west, due north, and south, then chayiv the dalar amas l'chudei. But if you're throwing it in a diagonal direction, ein chayiv at yizrok ayaver dalar amas balachsoinon. Okay, now the next thing is the amud. Now we're going to look at the amud, and that's what the picture is related to the amud, which is the next one. So let's see the next one. What about this case? Omer Papa Bodakl and Rava asked us a question. He wanted to know how good we know our stuff. And this is the question. Amud b'shus harabim. We know that if you have a post in b'shus harabim that's 4 tvachim by 10 tvachim high, it's considered a b'shus hayochim. So now this surface that we're saying is 4 tvachim. What does that mean? 4 tvachim. What if it's a round pillar and it's exactly 4 across? Would that be big enough to be a b'shus hayochim? Or it's got to be square, so you have your diagonal. He told us, Lav Hani Rab Chananya, isn't that what Rab Chananya told us? The Tanya Rab Chananya Amar Kazeh Yu Kol Shosh Shabbos. So in fact, it will depend on the orientation of the post, and that's what this is about. If the orientation of the post is, if its sides are flat with east, west, north, south, then it's enough to be 4 by 4. But if its points are by north south, then you'd have to make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. Not all 4 amas are created equal. V'zehu she'amru ha'ani ma'ar baraglo. So in order for us to understand this Gemara, a little bit of a complex thing, we have to just chazor over quickly the Mishnah. What we had over here was, we had our Mishnah that was talking about an interesting case about somebody making an Eruv without a bread in a location where he's not standing at. He's saying that tree, that's 2,000 amos ahead, that's why I want to make my Eruv. Now you read this Mishnah, it says, V'zui sha'amru ha'ani ma'ar baraglo. This is what it means, ani ma'ar baraglo. So the pashut of shot of the Mishnah is, this case where the ani is making an Eruv and he's not even there, that's ani ma'ar baraglo, which is a little bit funny because the ani is not making the baraglo either. His feet aren't there either, right? The tree is ahead of the game. But that's the pashut shot. And Amar Reb Meir on that he said, "Ein lanu ela ani." Only an ani could do this, and not an usher. And Reb Yehuda says, "No, echad ani ve'echad usher could do it." So I want to focus on two lines because the Gemara is going to focus on them. The Gemara is going to want to know v'zuhi sha'amru. What is it referring to? The Gemara is going to know, is this referring to v'zuhi sha'amru ani ma'ar baraglo? Is that referring to the case of our Mishnah where he's setting himself up to be kind of shvisa in the distance? Or is this speaking about a case that the Mishnah has not been discussing until now, where he's been kind of shvisa right where he is? That's ani baraglo. So that's right. So we're going to see that in a second. And then the Gemara, the Mishnah's quote of Meir says, "Einan el ani, and if you don't make a lasher, lo yamu ma'arvim pas, ala hakal al asher, shlo yetzav yarbaraglav, lo yamu ma'arvim the pas, ala hakal al asher, shlo yetzav yarbaraglav." The Gemara is going to want to know who's saying that as well, and what it's referring to. That's number one. The second number one we need is, before we can start the sugya, we need to define ani and asher. Usher does not mean somebody who's rich, and ani does not mean somebody who's poor. Ani means somebody who's traveling and he doesn't have bread with him. And an usher means someone who's at home and he has bread that he could send to somebody else. So based on that, the Gemara analyzes these words of the Mishnah. So Zokta Heilige Gemara. V'zeu she'amru ani ma'arav baraglav, Amar Reb Meir anu ein anu el ani. Amar Reb Nachman. So Reb Nachman said, and this is how we paskin, machloikis b'mekaymi. The machloikis between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda is if you want to make, if the person wants to make the Eruv where he is, he's not doing a gimmick. I want to be kind of shvisa right here where I'm standing. Can you be kind of shvisa where you're standing? So Reb Meir savar ikur erev pas. Reb Meir holds ikur erev pas, and therefore an usher would not be able to make an Eruv where he was using his feet. And ani who the kilu rabbanon iluya. It's only an ani who the rabbanon are makel and allow them to make an eruv just by standing somewhere. And Rashi says, what is an ani? Haba b'derech the ein imay pass. If someone is traveling and he happens not to have pass with him, who the kilu rabbanon gabei loymar shvizasi b'm koyni. Only he could do that. But avol osher loy. If a person has pass, then he has to use pass make an eruv. You have Yehuda Aimer, Yehuda Savar, Iker Erev Beregel, Echad Ani Vechad Asher. Everybody holds that if you're standing right there, you for sure could make an error without pass. You can be cutting streets where you are. Al B'Mokim Ploini, but if it's a question of making an error further up the road, Divrei HaKoil Ani in Asher Lo. Everybody would agree that only somebody who's traveling without pass could make an error up the road without anything. But if you're at home, you cannot make an Eruv up the road unless you're actually sending somebody there to place it with pass. But if you're traveling and you're stuck and you want to make an Eruv up the road, then you're allowed. And that's what it means. V'zuhi sha'amru. When it says v'zuhi sha'amru, this is what we said, that an oni is ma'arav b'raglov. Who used those words? Man katanila. Who said those words? Reb Meir. It's Reb Meir who quoted those words. Ve'ahai koi, and on what case is he referring to? We're talking about somebody who's not making an Eruv up ahead. We're talking about someone who's been kind of shvisa where he's standing. And there Reb Meir said that only an oni could do this, but an usher cannot. Now, what about the words at the end of the Mishnah? Who said those words? That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said at the end of the Mishnah that since I have the whole issue of passes to make it easier, but avada and osher could make an Erev even where he's standing. So Rav Meir holds that an Osher is not allowed to make an Erev where he's standing. He has to have pas. If he has pas, Osher means if you have pas, you must use pas to make the Erev. You can't just say, I want to be Kodesh Shvisa here because I'm standing here. And the Yehuda holds you could. But everybody agrees that if you're sitting at home, you need to send pas to make an Erev up ahead. You cannot make an Erev up ahead without sending pas if you're sitting at home. If you're traveling and you want to make Erev up ahead, then you could, right? Now we know, we learned this before, Rabbi Meir of Rabbi Yehuda, we learned you pascha like Rabbi Yehuda, right? We had a whole sugi about that. So that means according to this shot, psak halacha will be, which is how the Gemara remains, is that an Osher is allowed to make an Erev Mkaimai, meaning if an Osher is traveling and he has bread with him, he could say, I want to be Kodesh Shvisa where I'm standing without using bread. But if you're sitting at home and you want to be Kodesh Shvisa 2,000 amas away, you can't just say, I want to be Kodesh Shvisa there. You actually have to send somebody with the bread. However, if you're traveling and you don't have bread with you, then you could say, I want to be Kodesh Shvisa 2,000 amas ahead, even though you're not sending any bread. That's how we pass in Halacha L'Maisa. Rav Chisda Amar, Machlokes b'makom ploini, fakert. So even Rabbi Yehuda holds that even an Osher, even if you have bread and you're at home, you're allowed to make this Erev up ahead. So machlokes b'makom ploini. Even when I want to make the Erev up ahead, there's a machlokes. There are Meir Savar only in Osher, right? If Meir holds only someone who's traveling, not somebody who's at home. If we discover echad only the echad Osher, Aval ben Koimi. Well, then he might be considered an ani as well, because that's what Rashi says. An Osher is someone who is at home and he has bread. Right. In order to be an ani, you either have to be on the way and any place. If you don't have pas, it's also considered an ani. Yeah, I think you could. Yeah. But if you want to be kind of shvisa, where you're standing, divrei hakoil echadoni ve'echadosher. There, even Reb Meir agrees that anybody can make such an error. The ikar erev bered, because the main erev is being there yourself. The zui sha'amru. So when it says zui sha'amru that an ani is ma'ar beregel man katanila, it would be Reb Meir. But haya koi, on what cases are going on? It would be going if someone was traveling and got dark, and he says, I'm sorry, and your mayor is saying that only an ani, someone who does not pass, could make that erev up ahead, but not an usher. And the end of the Mishnah, which says, that would be divrei hakoil, because everybody agrees that bin koimai, you could make an erev. Okay, Zok to Gemara. We're going to bring a right to Rab Nachman that, in fact, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Arvin the Pas. Both an Ani and an Osher could be Ma'arv the Pas. V'lo yetze Osher chutz l'tchum. An Osher should not go out of the tchum. The Yomer, and he says, Shvisasi b'mkoimi. He should not say Shvisasi b'mkoimi. You know why? We don't you're traveling and it got dark. Divrei Meir. Yudoimer echadoni ve'echad asher ma'arvin beregel. And whether you're an ani or an usher, you're allowed to go to a specific place and say, I want to be Kodesh Shvisa here. The Yetze usher chutz l'tchum, and an usher is allowed to go chutz l'tchum. The Yomer tehei shvisasi b'makom zeh b'mkoimi tehei shvisasi b'mkoimi. I want to be Kodesh Shvisa right here where I am. V'zehu ikra shel erev, and this is what a normal erev is. V'tiru chachamim l'balabayis l'shalech eruvin v'yad abdoi v'yad benoi v'yad shluchai v'shvil ha'hakolah. So from here you see that what Rabbi Yehuda, you see Rabbi Yehuda over here allows you to make an erev with your feet. However, an Osher can make an erev with his feet. He's allowed to go to a place and be Kodesh Shvisa there, but he can't be Kodesh Shvisa in the distance without sending bread there, which is exactly what Rav Nachman said. Rav Chisda said that he'd even be able to send bread there. Sorry, Rabbi Yehuda, that you can make a remote Erev even if I don't have to send bread. Rabbi who's at home could make an Erev remotely without sending bread there. But it's only Rabbi Nachman who held that Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't allow that. Rabbi Yehuda only allows you to make an Erev with your own feet by going to where you want to be. That you're allowed to do even if you're a noisy. Sure, because it says only that's allowed. He can't sit in his house and say my shvisa should be elsewhere. Right? He's trying to show how easy it is. There would have been the only way the usher could make an Erev without pass is if he's actually there himself. With pass. That's right. Because the pass is lahakol. So Rabbi Yehuda. So that's one raya. Ma'aseh b'anshi beis mamo, b'anshi beis guryoin ba'aruma. There was these people who were very charitable, and Rabbi Elevin spoke out. The reason why they were so charitable is because they were from the Bnei Eli, and the Bnei Eli had a curse that they would die young, and the way they got around that curse was with Torah. I think they say Abaye was from the Bnei Eli, and with Chesed. So they had this food. They would give out food. They would do Chesed to the public, and that was their way of getting around the challenge that they had with their yichus. Nowadays, if someone was an inical of Eli, he would not give out any food and not do any chesed, so no one should chap that he might need in the Eli. I'll never be able to do a shidduch. What was right? So you I wouldn't stare to sit there. Tell from the other side. So you it's simukan aniyim. They used to give out our version of candies to the aniyim, dried figs and raisins, b'shnei b'tzoros in the years of hunger. They would hand them out. They would hand them out every Shabbos morning. Uvayin aniyei kfar sichin v'aniyei kfar chananya, and aniyim from the surrounding areas out of the tchum would want to be there for Shabbos morning to be able to catch the candies by the oifer. So what they would do is they would stand themselves at the tchum so that they'll be able to arrive for Shabbos morning. They can be able to come Shabbos morning to get these candies. And Shabbos morning they come. So they themselves go. So you see from here, they were considered Ashirim because they didn't get stuck on the way. They're heading out the Chetchila. And when they head out the Chetchila to go, they had to be there themselves. They couldn't be kind of shvisa remotely. They had to be themselves by the tchum to be kind of shvisa. Amar Bashi, Masnisa Namideka. Our Mishnah also seems to indicate that the pshat would be this way. That Rabbi Yehuda holds but he cannot be kind of shvisa remotely unless he sends pass. The Katani. I'm sorry, this is the next Mishnah that we're going to be learning on Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Someone who is leaving the city. So Reuven had a house in Toronto and Reuven had a house in Hamilton. And Friday afternoon, he decided that he's going to spend Shabbos in Hamilton. So he heads out from Toronto to Hamilton. So it's a city that's close enough that people make an Erev in between Toronto and Hamilton so that they can travel there. And what happened was, and his friend said, no, if you're going, don't go to Hamilton now, there's a big pile up, you're going to get stuck in traffic, don't go. Rashi uses the example, it's very bad weather, or there's some other reason why he met people who convinced him that he shouldn't go for Shabbos. Let's see what Rashi's example was. I know one of them is that there's bad weather. The other reason is, Eis Chama or Eis Sina. It was either very cold, or there's a COVID outbreak, or whatever it is, he convinced him not to go Friday afternoon. But he still wants to go on Shabbos. So the halach is, hu muter leilech. He is allowed to go the next day on Shabbos to Hamilton. He didn't make an error. Apparently he didn't make an error. But the chobunah here, asurin divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara asks Ravinaba, Maishna you, Maishna inu. Why could he go and not them? He had two batim. He had two houses, one in Toronto, one in Hamilton. And there's 4,000 amas in between the two houses. When he left on Arab Shabbos, did he go to make an Arab? No, he was actually planning to go to Hamilton. So he was considered an Ani because he was on his way. So therefore, since we know he wants to go there, and he decided to abandon his trip, to abort his trip today because they told him about the pileup, but he wants to go. And he's an Ani right now because he's on the way. And when he left to travel, not to make the Arab. So he could make that Arab. We say there's a Hanan Sahadi, even though he didn't say anything, there's an Hanan Sahadi that he had in mind to make this remote Arab. He knows the route, and he picked some place smack in the middle where he made an automatic Arab. So he can go tomorrow. Why is that? Keep it in Orcha. Since when he left, he wasn't going to make an Arab, he was going to travel. Havalayani. With those people, they didn't make any Arab, and and they had no intention of making an Arab, and therefore they don't have an Arab, but he does have an Arab, because even though he didn't say it, it's implied with Hanan Sahadi, since we know he wanted to go and he had to abort his trip, and he's an Ani at the time where he aborted this trip, where he had in mind to make that Arab, at that time he was considered an Ani, because he didn't leave for the purposes of placing the Arab, he left his home for the purposes of actually travel. Had he left his home just to make the Arab and then go back to his home for the night, that's considered an usher. Alma, see the mirror, called b'makom ploini, if you want to make a remote Arab elsewhere, only in usher loy. Only someone who's already has left to travel, only he could do it, but not an usher. Shmamina. Masalo Reb Chia bar Ashi l'Chia bar Rab kamei de Rab. Reb Chia bar Ashi was teaching Chia bar Rab in front of Rab. That means that's tutoring a student right in front of his parents. A little bit uncomfortable. It's the third time we had that in this Masechta. That someone was tutored Rab's kid, and Rab was listening in. And he taught him our Mishnah. Echadoni ve'echadosher. And Amalei Rab, Sayim ba'onami halacha Reb Yehuda. If you're tutoring my kid, tell him as well that halacha is like Reb Yehuda. Now the only problem I have is okay, that's fine. But Rashi sticks in Uchrab Nachman ben Koimi and tell him Shat that Shat and Reb Yehuda is like Reb Nachman said, meaning that Reb Yehuda allows you to make an Erev if you're there yourself. Now, I don't know how Rashi knew that Rav wanted Chia bar Ashi to teach his son that the Lochzak of Nachman. That I don't know. I was trying to see if there's any clue. I couldn't find that out. He was going to try to Yehuda. Yeah. I don't know how you see. I don't know how Rashi knew that Rav passed like a Nachman, not like a Christ. That I don't know. And we're talking more about the Rabbi Bar Chanan have a rugged Asi Martinva Lupumadisa. He used to regularly travel from Martinva Lupumadisa, and it was that type of place where you needed the Arab Kuman in between. And he would say, he would say, he would always, before he left, when he was still in Osher, he would make a remote Arab in Tinsa. Omar le Abaye, my daitach. Reb Meir Reb Yehuda, halacha Reb Yehuda, are you possibly like Reb Yehuda? And you want to follow Reb Chisda who said, you want to follow Reb Chisda who holds that Reb Yehuda allows even a remote Arab? Well, Reb Nachman. But Reb Nachman said that Reb Yehuda does not allow a remote Arab. He only allows you to make an Arab in Koimi. The Tanya Kabasai, and we even brought Mishnayos to support Reb Nachman's position. So what happened was, Rabbi Bar Chanan, I'm chosher, I won't do it anymore. I think I made a mistake. I passed him by mistake like Reb Chisda. I should have passed him like Reb Nachman. Omer Rami Bar Chama. Hare Omer Shabbos Yesh Tadal Ramis. We said, I'm sorry? Maybe. Yeah, it could be. Problem is, I was trying to figure it out before I got to this Gemara. So, Gemara, Hare Omer Shabbos Yesh Tadal Ramis. We know on Shabbos, if you're cutting the streets of a Raglov, you don't only have 2,000 Amish, you also get an extra 4,000 Amma wiggle room. So what's the halacha by an Erev? If you send someone to put past the place an Erev for you, yesh loy dalar amas or loy, you also get that extra 4 amas of wiggle room. On Marava, you can bring a raya from our Mishnah. Tashma, Rabbi Yehuda said, loy amru ma'arvim b'pas el lahak el asher shelo yetze b'yarav b'agla. The reason why, really, everybody can make an Erev with their feet. The whole idea of using pas is to be make a little usher shouldn't have to go. He send the shliach. Well, the amrit ein loy. If you're going to say that if he uses pas, he loses the 4 amas of wiggle room. That's not good. He loses 4 amas. And sometimes that 4 amas is the difference between making it home and not, as we saw in several cases. So you know what? It still might be considered a kula because at least he's happy he doesn't have to slip out there before Shabbos and he's willing to give up the extra 4 amas. Okay, I guess we'll stop here.